Sarah slowly opened her eyes to find herself lying on a soft couch in a warm room she didn't recognize. Thick blankets covered her body, and she could smell hot soup cooking somewhere nearby. For a moment, she wondered if she had died and this was some kind of afterlife, because the contrast between the freezing dumpster and this cozy living room seemed too dramatic to be real. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair appeared in her field of vision, holding a steaming mug of hot chocolate. The woman introduced herself as Maria Santos, a nurse who lived in the apartment building next to the grocery store. She explained that she had been coming home from her late shift at the hospital when she heard a dog barking frantically in the alley. Maria told Sarah how the thin brown dog had run up to her as she got out of her car, grabbing the hem of her coat with its teeth and pulling her toward the dumpster. The dog's behavior was so unusual and persistent that Maria decided to follow it, even though she was tired from working a 12-hour shift. When Maria discovered Sarah unconscious in the freezing container, she immediately called for help while trying to warm the young woman with her own coat. The paramedics had arrived quickly, but they said if Sarah had been found even an hour later, she might not have survived. Her body temperature had dropped dangerously low, and she was showing all the signs of severe hypothermia. As Maria recounted the rescue, Sarah's eyes searched the room for the dog that had saved her life. She found him lying on a rug near the fireplace, his thin body finally relaxed and warm. Someone had given him food and water, and he looked more peaceful than he probably had in months. When he noticed Sarah looking at him, his tail began to wag, and he walked over to the couch, gently placing his head near her hand. Maria explained that she couldn't just leave the dog outside after what he had done. She had brought him inside and given him a bath, revealing that underneath all the dirt and matted fur was a beautiful golden retriever mix, with intelligent brown eyes and a gentle temperament. The dog clearly had been someone's pet at one time, because he was house-trained and knew basic commands, but he had no collar or identification. Sarah learned that she had been unconscious for almost 8 hours. During that time, Maria had stayed by her side, monitoring her condition and gradually warming her body back to a normal temperature. The nurse had even taken time off from her next shift to make sure Sarah was okay, despite barely knowing her. When Sarah tried to thank Maria for her kindness, the older woman just smiled and said that she was a mother herself, and she couldn't imagine leaving someone's child alone in such a dangerous situation. She had called the hospital to make sure Sarah didn't have any serious injuries from her fall, and while her ankle was sprained and she had a mild concussion, there was no permanent damage. As the day progressed, Sarah found herself opening up to Maria about her life on the streets. She told her about aging out of foster care with nowhere to go, about the job she couldn't get because she had no permanent address, and about the daily struggle just to find enough food to survive. Maria listened without judgment, occasionally, asking gentle questions but never making Sarah feel ashamed of her circumstances. The dog, whom Maria had started calling Hero because of his life-saving actions, seemed to understand that Sarah needed comfort. He stayed close to the couch, occasionally resting his head on her lap or offering his paw when she seemed sad. There was something almost human about the way he responded to her emotions, as if he had experienced his own share of hardship and recognized a kindred spirit. That evening, Maria made a phone call that would change Sarah's life. She contacted a friend who worked for a local charity that helped homeless youth find temporary housing and job training. Within an hour, a social worker named David Chen arrived at the apartment with information about programs that could help Sarah get back on her feet. David explained that there was a transitional housing program specifically designed for young people who had aged out of foster care. The program provided a safe place to live for up to 2 years while participants worked on getting their education and finding stable employment. There was even a waiting list, but David said he might be able to find Sarah a spot within a few weeks. While the adults discussed options for Sarah's future, Hero remained by her side, as if he understood that these conversations were important for his new friend. Sarah found herself running her fingers through his clean fur, marveling at how this starving homeless dog had somehow found the strength and intelligence to save her life. As night fell, Maria insisted that both Sarah and Hero stay another night. She set up a comfortable bed for Sarah in the guest room and made a cozy spot for Hero on the floor beside the bed. Before going to sleep, Sarah sat on the floor next to the dog, looking into his warm brown eyes. She whispered her thanks to him, promising that somehow, someday, she would find a way to repay him for saving her life. Hero responded by gently licking her hand and then curling up close to her, as if he understood that they were both safer when they stayed together. For the first time in months, Sarah fell asleep feeling truly safe and warm. She knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges and uncertainty, but she also knew that she wasn't facing them alone anymore. She had found an unexpected guardian, Angel, in the form of a starving dog who had chosen to help her instead of simply walking away. In the morning, Sarah would begin the process of rebuilding her life, and Hero would be right there beside her, ready for whatever adventures lay ahead. Neither of them knew what the future would hold, but they both understood that some bonds are formed in the most unexpected circumstances and last forever. The winter of 2019 hit Chicago harder than anyone expected. Snow piled 3 feet high on sidewalks, and the temperature dropped to -15 degrees. Most people stayed inside their warm homes, but Sarah Mitchell had no choice but to venture out into the bitter cold. Sarah was only 19 years old, but life had already thrown her more challenges than most people face in a lifetime. She had been living on the streets for 6 months after aging out of the foster care system. With no family to turn to and no money for rent, she survived by finding shelter wherever she could and eating whatever scraps she managed to find. On this particular Tuesday morning, Sarah woke up behind a grocery store where she had been sleeping under a pile of cardboard boxes. Her thin jacket provided little protection against the freezing wind that cut through the alleyway like sharp knives. Her stomach cramped with hunger, reminding her that she hadn't eaten a real meal in 3 days. The grocery store had thrown away expired bread and damaged canned goods the night before. Sarah knew this because she had been watching their disposal routine for weeks. She waited until the morning shift arrived and the back alley was empty before approaching the large green dumpster. Climbing into the cold metal container was always difficult, but today the icy surface made it nearly impossible. Sarah's fingers were already numb, and she struggled to grip the edge as she pulled herself up and over the side. The smell of rotting food mixed with the sharp scent of cleaning chemicals made her stomach turn, but she had learned to ignore such discomforts long ago. She dug through bags of garbage, searching for anything edible. Her hands moved quickly through banana peels, moldy vegetables, and empty containers. Finally, she found what she was looking for: a loaf of bread that was only slightly stale and a can of soup with a small dent in the side. As Sarah tried to climb out of the dumpster with her findings, disaster struck. Her foot slipped on a patch of ice that had formed inside the container, and she tumbled backward, hitting her head hard against the metal wall. The impact left her dizzy and disoriented. When she tried to stand up, sharp pain shot through her ankle, and she realized she had twisted it badly in the fall. The high walls of the dumpster suddenly seemed impossible to scale. Sarah tried several times to pull herself up, but her injured ankle couldn't support her weight and her head was still spinning from the blow. Panic began to set in as she realized she was trapped in the freezing container with no way to get out. She called for help, but her voice was weak from days of poor nutrition and the cold air. The alley was empty, and the thick walls of the surrounding buildings seemed to swallow her cries. Sarah pulled her thin jacket tighter around her body and tried to stay calm, but she could feel the cold seeping into her bones. Hours passed, and the temperature continued to drop. Sarah's lips turned blue, and she could barely feel her fingers and toes. She knew that hypothermia was setting in, and if she didn't get out soon, she might not survive the night. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had climbed into the dumpster looking for food to survive, but now it had become her potential tomb. As darkness fell over the city, Sarah's strength began to fade. She had stopped calling for help because her voice was gone and she could barely keep her eyes open. The cold was making her drowsy, and she knew from her time on the streets that falling asleep in these conditions could be fatal. Just when she thought all hope was lost, Sarah heard a sound that would change her life forever. It was a soft whimpering coming from somewhere nearby. At first she thought her mind was playing tricks on her, but the sound grew louder and more distinct. Something was moving around outside the dumpster. Through her blurred vision, Sarah saw a pair of brown eyes peering down at her from the edge of the container. A dog, thin and obviously hungry, was looking down at her with what seemed like concern. The animal was clearly a stray, with matted fur and ribs showing through its coat, but its eyes held an intelligence that Sarah recognized immediately. The dog began to bark, not aggressively, but in a way that seemed deliberate and urgent. It was as if the animal understood that Sarah was in trouble and was trying to alert someone to her situation. The barking continued for several minutes, echoing off the walls of the alley and hopefully reaching the ears of anyone who might be within hearing distance. Sarah tried to respond to the dog, to let it know that she could see it and appreciated its presence, but she could barely whisper. The cold had taken too much of her strength and she was fighting just to stay conscious. Still, something about the dog's presence gave her a small spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would hear the barking and come to investigate. The dog disappeared from view for a moment, and Sarah's heart sank, thinking that her only chance for rescue had just walked away. But within minutes the animal was back, this time accompanied by the sound of human voices. The dog had somehow managed to lead people to the alley, though Sarah was too weak to understand exactly what was happening. She could hear footsteps approaching and voices growing louder, but everything seemed distant and dreamlike. The hypothermia was affecting her ability to think clearly, and she wasn't sure if what she was experiencing was real or just her mind creating false hope in her final moments. The last thing Sarah remembered before losing consciousness was the feeling of strong hands lifting her out of the freezing dumpster and the warm breath of the dog as it licked her face as if trying to bring her back to life. 2 weeks after the rescue, Sarah found herself standing outside the New Horizons transitional housing facility with a small bag of belongings and Hero walking quietly beside her. David Chen had managed to secure her a spot in the program faster than expected, and Maria had insisted on giving Sarah some basic necessities to start her new life. The building was a converted apartment complex that housed 30 young people between the ages of 18 and 24. Each resident had their own small studio apartment and access to shared common areas, a computer lab, and meeting rooms where life skills classes were held. The program also provided counseling services and job placement assistance. Sarah's caseworker, Jennifer Walsh, was an energetic woman in her 30s who had once been in the foster care system herself. She understood the unique challenges that came with aging out of care and was passionate about helping young people build stable, independent lives. When Jennifer met Hero, she immediately fell in love with his gentle nature and was impressed by his obvious devotion to Sarah. However, there was one major problem. The housing facility had a strict no-pets policy. Jennifer explained that while she understood the special bond between Sarah and Hero, the building's insurance and health regulations simply didn't allow animals. She suggested that Sarah could visit Hero regularly if Maria was willing to continue caring for him temporarily. Sarah felt her heart breaking at the thought of being separated from the dog who had saved her life. Hero seemed to sense her distress and moved closer to her side, pressing his warm body against her leg in a gesture of comfort. She knew that accepting help from the housing program was the smart thing to do for her future. But leaving Hero behind felt like abandoning her best friend. Maria, who had driven them to the facility, saw the struggle on Sarah's face and made an offer that surprised everyone. She said that she had been thinking about getting a dog for companionship anyway, and Hero had already become like family to her. She offered to officially adopt Hero and give Sarah unlimited visitation rights, essentially making them co-owners of the remarkable dog. Jennifer was impressed by this arrangement and agreed to make it part of Sarah's case file. She said that maintaining the bond with Hero could actually be beneficial for Sarah's emotional well-being as she worked on rebuilding her life. Having a support system that included both humans and animals would provide stability during what could be a challenging transition period. Sarah's apartment was small but clean and warm. It had a bed, a desk, a tiny kitchenette, and most importantly, a heating system that actually worked. After months of sleeping in doorways and abandoned buildings, having her own space with a lock on the door felt like an incredible luxury. She spent her first night just appreciating the silence and safety of being indoors. The next morning, Sarah began the intake process for the housing program. She met with counselors who helped her set goals for the next 2 years. The program required residents to either be working or attending school, and provided support to help them achieve both. Sarah decided that she wanted to complete her high school education first and then pursue training in a field that would provide stable employment. Jennifer arranged for Sarah to take placement tests to determine her academic level. Despite the disruptions in her education due to multiple foster placements, Sarah tested surprisingly well. Her natural intelligence and love of reading had served her well, and she was only about 6 months behind in her studies. With some intensive work, she could earn her diploma within a year. The housing program also included mandatory life skills classes where residents learned about budgeting, healthy relationships, conflict resolution, and other practical skills needed for independent living. Sarah found these classes incredibly valuable because foster care had moved her around so much that she had never learned many basic life skills that most people take for granted. 3 times a week, Sarah took the bus to Maria's apartment to visit Hero. The dog always seemed to know when she was coming and would wait by the window watching for her arrival. Their reunions were joyful affairs, with Hero dancing around Sarah and covering her face with kisses while his tail wagged so hard his entire body wiggled. During these visits, Sarah would take Hero for long walks around the neighborhood, teaching him new tricks and just enjoying his company. Maria often joined them, and the 3 of them developed a routine of stopping at the local park where Hero could run freely while Sarah and Maria talked about everything from current events to future plans. Maria became like a surrogate mother to Sarah, offering advice and support without being pushy or controlling. She had raised 3 children of her own, and her nurturing instincts naturally extended to this young woman who had come into her life under such dramatic circumstances. Sarah had never experienced this kind of stable, unconditional support from an adult, and it was transformative. As weeks turned into months, Sarah began to flourish in ways she had never thought possible. Her physical health improved dramatically with regular meals and adequate sleep. Her mental health also benefited from the stability and support system she had found. She was getting excellent grades in her accelerated education program and had even made friends with some of the other residents at the housing facility. Hero also thrived under Maria's care. The veterinarian had estimated that he was about 3 years old and in good health, despite his previous malnutrition. His coat became thick and shiny, and he gained weight until he reached a healthy 45 pounds. More importantly, his natural intelligence and gentle temperament became more apparent as he felt secure and loved. One evening, as Sarah was studying for her math final exam, she received an unexpected visitor. Jennifer knocked on her door with exciting news. A local veterinary clinic was looking for a part-time assistant who could work around a school schedule. The job would involve basic cleaning, helping with animals, and learning about veterinary care. Jennifer thought it might be perfect for Sarah, especially given her special connection with animals. The next day, Sarah interviewed for the position with Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, who owned the clinic with her husband. When Dr. Rodriguez heard the story of how Hero had saved Sarah's life, she was immediately interested in hiring her. She said that anyone who had earned such loyalty from an animal clearly had a special gift for connecting with them. Sarah got the job and started working 15 hours a week while continuing her studies. She loved everything about working at the clinic, from comforting nervous pets to learning about animal behavior and medical care. Dr. Rodriguez became a mentor, teaching Sarah about the veterinary field and encouraging her to consider it as a career path. For the first time since she was a small child, Sarah began to dream about a real future. She could imagine herself graduating from high school, maybe going to college, and possibly even becoming a veterinarian herself someday. These dreams felt possible now, supported by the foundation of stability and love that Hero had helped her find. 8 months after Hero saved her life, Sarah was walking to work at the veterinary clinic when she noticed something that made her stop in her tracks. A young man, probably around her age, was sitting on the sidewalk outside the grocery store where she had once searched for food. He looked thin and desperate, and something about his situation reminded her painfully of her own recent past. The young man's name was Marcus, and Sarah could see that he was trying to stay invisible while hoping someone might offer help. His clothes were dirty and too thin for the cool autumn weather, and he had the same hollow look in his eyes that Sarah remembered seeing in her own reflection during her months on the streets. Instead of walking past like most people did, Sarah approached Marcus and asked if he was hungry. When he nodded hesitantly, she offered to buy him lunch at the small cafe next to the clinic. Marcus was suspicious at first, probably wondering what Sarah wanted in return. but her genuine kindness eventually convinced him to accept her offer. Over sandwiches and hot coffee, Marcus told Sarah his story. He had aged out of foster care 6 months earlier, just like Sarah had. Unlike her, he had managed to find a job at a fast food restaurant, but when he got sick and missed too many days of work, he was fired. Without income, he couldn't afford his tiny studio apartment and ended up on the streets. Sarah listened to Marcus's story with deep understanding, remembering her own feelings of hopelessness and desperation. She told him about her experience with the transitional housing program and gave him Jennifer Walsh's contact information. She also mentioned that Dr. Rodriguez was looking for another part-time assistant at the clinic, and while the job didn't pay much, it might be enough to help him get back on his feet. When Sarah returned to Maria's apartment that evening to visit Hero, she couldn't stop thinking about Marcus. She told Maria about meeting him and how his situation reminded her of her own darkest days. Maria listened thoughtfully and then made a suggestion that surprised Sarah. Maria proposed that they organize a small support group for young people who had aged out of foster care. She said that Sarah's success story could inspire others, and maybe they could create a network of people who understood each other's challenges. Maria had connections through her work at the hospital and knew other healthcare workers who might be willing to volunteer their time and expertise. The idea excited Sarah more than she had expected. She realized that helping Marcus had given her a sense of purpose that was different from anything she had experienced before. Maybe this was a way she could give back and honor the help that Hero, Maria, and so many others had given her. Sarah talked to Jennifer Walsh about the support group idea, and Jennifer was enthusiastic about the proposal. She said that peer support was one of the most effective tools for helping young people transition to independence, and she offered to help Sarah navigate the administrative requirements for starting such a group. Dr. Rodriguez also supported the idea and offered to let them use the clinic's conference room for meetings. She said that many of her clients were families who might be interested in volunteer opportunities, and she could help spread the word about the support group through her practice. The first meeting of what they decided to call Second Chances was held on a Saturday afternoon in November. Sarah had invited Marcus and 2 other young people she had met through the housing program. Maria came to help facilitate, and Jennifer attended as a professional resource person. Hero attended too, serving as an unofficial therapy dog for the group. His presence seemed to calm everyone's nerves, and his story of survival and redemption became a metaphor for what the group members were trying to achieve in their own lives. Several people commented that if a starving stray dog could find the strength to help someone else, they could certainly find the strength to help each other. The group started small, but word spread quickly through social services networks and youth programs around the city. By December, they were having 2 meetings per month with 8 to 10 regular attendees. Some were current residents of transitional housing programs, while others were living independently, but still struggling with the challenges of early adulthood without family support. Sarah found herself naturally taking on a leadership role in the group. Her experience on the streets gave her credibility with participants who might not trust adults or authority figures, but her success in the housing program showed them that change was possible. She was able to connect with group members in a way that even trained social workers sometimes couldn't. The meetings followed a flexible format that included sharing updates on everyone's progress, discussing practical challenges like job hunting or dealing with difficult landlords, and planning group activities that helped build friendships and support networks. Sometimes they organized movie nights or potluck dinners, and occasionally they did community service projects together. One of the most successful initiatives was a mentorship program where group members who had achieved certain milestones, like completing high school or finding stable employment, were paired with newer members who were still working toward those goals. Sarah became a mentor to Marcus, helping him navigate the job application process and adjust to living in transitional housing. Marcus thrived with Sarah's support and encouragement. He got the part-time job at the veterinary clinic and proved to be excellent with animals. Dr. Rodriguez was so impressed with his work ethic and natural abilities that she increased his hours and began teaching him more advanced skills. Like Sarah, Marcus discovered that working with animals gave him a sense of purpose and peace that he had never experienced before. The success of Marcus and several other group members attracted attention from local, media, and nonprofit organizations. A reporter from the city newspaper wrote a feature story about second chances, focusing on how Sarah had transformed from a homeless teenager into a community leader in less than a year. The article mentioned Hero's role in Sarah's rescue and recovery, describing him as the inspiration for the group's philosophy that everyone deserves a second chance, regardless of their circumstances. The story included a photo of Sarah, Marcus, and Hero at the veterinary clinic, all of them healthy and happy. The publicity brought new volunteers and resources to Second Chances, including a small grant from a local foundation that allowed them to provide emergency assistance to group members facing crises like job loss or medical emergencies. They were able to help several people avoid returning to homelessness by providing temporary financial support while they got back on their feet. As Sarah's 18th birthday approached, she realized that her life had changed completely in the year since Hero had saved her from the freezing dumpster. She had earned her high school diploma, found meaningful work, built lasting friendships, and discovered her passion for helping others. Most importantly, she had learned that she was capable of creating the stable, loving life that she had always dreamed of having. On a warm spring morning exactly 1 year after Hero had saved her life, Sarah received a phone call that would test everything she had learned about resilience and hope. Maria was calling from the emergency room of the hospital where she worked, and her voice was shaking with worry. Hero had collapsed during their morning walk and was now at the emergency veterinary clinic in critical condition. The veterinarians weren't sure what was wrong, but they suspected it might be something serious. Maria had been too upset to drive, so she had called an ambulance for herself and ridden with Hero to the animal hospital. Sarah immediately left work and rushed to the veterinary emergency clinic, her heart pounding with fear. When she arrived, she found Maria in the waiting room, tears streaming down her face. Dr. Peterson, the emergency veterinarian, explained that Hero was experiencing symptoms that suggested a serious heart condition. They were running tests, but the initial examination was concerning. The next few hours felt like the longest of Sarah's life. She and Maria sat in the waiting room, holding hands and trying to comfort each other while they waited for news. Sarah couldn't stop thinking about how unfair it would be if Hero, who had saved her life and given her so much hope, was now facing a life-threatening illness himself. Other members of the Second Chances group began arriving at the hospital after hearing the news. Marcus came straight from work at Dr. Rodriguez's clinic, still wearing his scrubs. Jennifer Walsh stopped by during her lunch break to offer support. Even some of the younger group members skipped school to be there for Sarah and Hero. Dr. Peterson finally came out with the test results late in the afternoon. Hero had been born with a heart defect that had gone undetected during his previous examinations. The condition was progressive, which meant it had been getting worse over time. The stress of his months as a stray dog had probably accelerated the progression of the disease. The veterinarian explained that Hero's condition was treatable with medication and careful management, but it would require significant lifestyle changes and ongoing medical care. The treatment would be expensive, and there were no guarantees about how much time they would have with him. Without treatment, Hero would probably live only a few more months. Sarah felt devastated by the news, but she was also determined to do everything possible to help Hero, just as he had helped her. She immediately volunteered to take on extra shifts at Dr. Rodriguez's clinic to help pay for Hero's medical care. Maria said she would cover the initial treatment costs, and together they would figure out how to manage the ongoing expenses. The Second Chances group rallied around Sarah and Hero in a way that demonstrated how strong their community had become. Group members organized fundraising events, including a car wash and a bake sale, to help with Hero's medical bills. Local businesses that had heard about their story donated goods and services for a silent auction. Dr. Rodriguez offered to provide Hero's ongoing care at cost, using her clinic's wholesale prices for medications and waiving her professional fees. She said that Hero had brought so much joy and purpose to her clinic. Through his connections with Sarah and Marcus, that helping him was the least she could do. The support from the community was overwhelming and emotional for Sarah. She had spent so many years feeling alone and unwanted that having so many people rally around her and Hero felt almost surreal. It was proof that the connections she had built over the past year were real and lasting. Hero responded well to the initial treatment and was able to come home after 3 days in the hospital. However, his activity level had to be significantly reduced. No more long walks or energetic play sessions. His new routine included daily medications, frequent rest periods, and regular checkups to monitor his heart function. Sarah adjusted her schedule so she could spend more time with Hero, helping Maria manage his care and making sure he got the attention and comfort he needed. She learned to administer his medications and watch for signs that his condition might be worsening. The experience taught her valuable skills that complemented her work at the veterinary clinic. Despite his illness, Hero remained the same gentle, intelligent dog who had saved Sarah's life. His tail still wagged when she arrived for visits, and he still seemed to understand when people around him needed comfort. If anything, his health scare had made everyone appreciate his presence even more. The Second Chances group decided to make Hero their official mascot, recognizing him as the inspiration for their community of support and second chances. They created a small memorial wall in their meeting room with photos and stories of Hero's impact on their lives. Group members who had never met Hero during his healthier days were moved by the stories of his rescue of Sarah and his ongoing role in their community. As summer approached, Sarah faced another major milestone. She was completing her 2-year commitment to the transitional housing program and preparing to move into her own apartment. She had saved enough money from her job at the clinic to afford a small studio apartment near Maria's building, which would allow her to continue helping with Hero's care. Dr. Rodriguez had also offered Sarah a full-time position at the clinic, with the opportunity to advance into more specialized roles as she gained experience. The job came with health insurance and other benefits that would provide the stability Sarah needed to continue building her independent life. Sarah was also considering enrolling in community college classes to begin working toward a degree in veterinary science. Her experiences with Hero and the other animals at the clinic had convinced her that working with animals was her true calling. Dr. Rodriguez had offered to help her apply for scholarships and grants that could make college financially possible. The prospect of leaving the housing program was both exciting and scary for Sarah. She had become comfortable with the support system and structured environment that the program provided. Moving to complete independence felt like another major leap, but she was confident that she had the skills and support network needed to succeed. Marcus was also preparing to graduate from the housing program and had decided to move into the same apartment building as Sarah. Dr. Rodriguez had offered him a full-time position as well, and he was planning to pursue certification as a veterinary technician. Their friendship had become like a sibling relationship, built on mutual understanding and shared experiences. On the anniversary of Hero's rescue of Sarah, the Second Chances group organized a celebration that honored both Hero's heroism and the community that had grown from that moment of crisis. They invited everyone who had played a role in Sarah's journey, from Jennifer Walsh and Dr. Rodriguez to the other residents of the housing program and volunteers who had supported their group. Hero, despite his health limitations, seemed to enjoy being the center of attention at the celebration. He wore a special collar with a medal that read, "Hero, Lifesaver, and Friend," and he received gentle pets and treats from everyone who attended. For Sarah, seeing how many lives Hero had touched through his initial act of bravery was deeply moving. The celebration also served as a fundraiser for Hero's ongoing medical care and for Second Chances Emergency Assistance Fund for group members. The community response was so generous that they raised enough money to secure Hero's care for the next 2 years and expand their support services for other young people aging out of foster care. 2 years after moving into her own apartment, Sarah stood in front of the bathroom mirror getting ready for what would be one of the most important days of her life. She was scheduled to give a presentation at the National Conference on Youth Aging Out of Foster Care, where she would share the story of Second Chances and its impact on young people in her city. The invitation to speak at the conference had come after a social work professor from the local university attended one of their group meetings and was impressed by what Sarah and her team had accomplished. The professor had nominated Second Chances for a national award recognizing innovative peer support programs, and they had won the recognition along with a substantial grant to expand their services. Sarah's apartment had become a comfortable home that reflected her journey from homelessness to stability. Photos of Hero covered one wall, showing him at various stages of his life from his early days as a stray to recent pictures of him resting peacefully in Maria's garden. The photos served as daily reminders of how much their lives had changed since that cold night in the dumpster. Hero was now 4 years old and had been living with his heart condition for over a year. While his energy levels remained limited, he had adapted well to his new lifestyle and seemed content spending his days napping in sunny spots and receiving gentle attention from his extended family of humans. His medications kept his symptoms manageable, and regular checkups showed that his condition was stable. The Second Chances group had grown from 8 members to over 40 active participants, with another 60 people who had graduated from the program but stayed connected as mentors and volunteers. They had helped more than 30 young people find stable housing, complete their education, and secure employment. The success rate was remarkable, especially considering the challenges faced by youth aging. Out of foster care, Sarah had completed her associate degree in animal science and was now enrolled in a 4-year program to become a veterinary technician. Her grades were excellent, and she had received multiple scholarships based on her academic performance and community service. Dr. Rodriguez continued to be her mentor and had offered her a permanent position at the clinic upon graduation. Marcus had become Sarah's co-leader of Second Chances and had proven to be gifted at connecting with young men who were struggling with the transition to independence. He had completed his certification as a veterinary technician and was now working full-time at Dr. Rodriguez's clinic while pursuing a degree in business management. His long-term goal was to open his own veterinary practice someday. The night before the conference presentation, Sarah visited Hero at Maria's apartment to spend some quiet time with him before traveling to the conference. Hero seemed to sense that something important was happening, because he stayed close to Sarah's side and rested his head on her lap while she talked to Maria about her presentation. Maria, now in her mid-50s, had become like a mother to Sarah and took great pride in watching her flourish. She had been promoted to head nurse at the hospital and had started a mentorship program there for young people interested in healthcare careers. Several Second Chances group members had found internships and job opportunities through Maria's connections. The flight to Washington, D.C. was Sarah's first time on an airplane, and she spent most of the journey looking out the window and thinking about how far she had traveled in more ways than just miles. 3 years earlier, she had been sleeping in alleys and searching through garbage for food. Now she was on her way to address hundreds of social workers, policymakers, and advocates at a national conference. The conference venue was an impressive hotel with marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Sarah felt intimidated at first, but she reminded herself that she belonged there because she had something important to share. Her presentation was scheduled for the second day of the conference, giving her time to attend other sessions and learn from experts in the field. During the networking sessions, Sarah met other young people who had aged out of foster care and gone on to achieve remarkable things. There was James, who had become a teacher and was working on education policy reform. There was Angela, who had started a non-profit organization providing job training for homeless youth. There was David, who had become a lawyer and specialized in advocating for children in the foster care system. Meeting these successful individuals reinforced Sarah's belief that young people aging out of foster care weren't broken or hopeless. They just needed the right support systems and opportunities to unlock their potential. Hero had been the catalyst for Sarah's transformation, but the real change had come from the community of people who had chosen to invest in her future. The morning of her presentation, Sarah called Maria to check on Hero and get some encouragement. Maria reported that Hero was having a good day and had even shown interest in playing with his favorite toy, something he hadn't done in several weeks. Maria said that Hero seemed to know Sarah was doing something important and was sending his love and support across the miles. Sarah's presentation was titled, "From Survival to Service: How a Rescue Dog Inspired a Movement." She had practiced the speech dozens of times, but standing in front of an audience of 300 people still made her nervous. She began by showing a photo of Hero on the night they found him. Thin and dirty, but with intelligent eyes that seemed to hold unlimited compassion. She told the story of that freezing night in the dumpster, Hero's determination to get help, and the chain of events that had led to her rescue and recovery. But she emphasized that the real story wasn't about one dramatic moment of rescue. It was about the sustained support and community that had enabled her to build a stable, meaningful life. Sarah shared statistics about the success rates of Second Chances participants compared to national averages for youth aging out of foster care. She talked about the importance of peer support and the power of giving young people opportunities to help others. She explained how Hero's example of unconditional love and service had become the inspiration for their entire approach to building community. The audience was deeply moved by Sarah's presentation, and many people approached her afterward to learn more about replicating the second chances model in their own communities. Sarah found herself exchanging contact information with social workers, policy advocates, and foundation representatives who wanted to support similar programs. During the question and answer session, someone asked Sarah what she thought was the most important factor in her success. Without hesitation, Sarah answered that it was learning that she was worth saving. She explained that Hero's actions that night had shown her that even when she felt completely worthless and forgotten, someone still believed her life had value. The presentation was such a success that Sarah was invited to join a national task force on improving outcomes for youth aging out of foster care. The task force would meet quarterly to develop policy recommendations and share best practices among programs across the country. Sarah would be the youngest member and the only one with lived experience of aging out of care. On the flight home, Sarah looked through the business cards and contact information she had collected at the conference. She was amazed by how many people wanted to learn from second chances and implement similar programs in their communities. What had started as a small support group inspired by a rescue dog had become a model for change that could help thousands of young people across the country. 5 years after Hero rescued her from the freezing dumpster, Sarah sat in the quiet garden behind Maria's house, holding Hero's graying head in her lap as the elderly dog took his final breaths. At 9 years old, Hero's heart had finally grown, too weak to continue, and despite all the medical care and love they had given him, it was time to say goodbye. Dr. Rodriguez had come to Maria's house to help Hero pass peacefully at home, surrounded by the people who loved him most. Sarah, Maria, Marcus, and several members of Second Chances had gathered to honor the dog who had changed all their lives. Hero seemed aware of their presence and content, his tail giving one last gentle wag before he closed his eyes forever. The grief that Sarah felt was overwhelming, but it was mixed with profound gratitude for everything Hero had given her. Without his intervention that cold night, she would never have survived to build the life she now had. Hero had not just saved her physically, he had shown her what unconditional love looked like and inspired her to create a community built on the same principles of compassion and service. The funeral service for Hero was held at the veterinary clinic where Sarah and Marcus worked. More than 100 people attended, including current and former Second Chances members, volunteers, Maria's family, Dr. Rodriguez's staff, and many others whose lives had been touched by Hero's story. Each person shared a memory of how Hero had affected them, and many credited him with inspiring their own acts of kindness and service. Sarah spoke last at the service, her voice steady despite her tears. She talked about how Hero had taught her that everyone deserves rescue, that love often comes from unexpected places, and that the best way to honor the help you receive is to help others in return. She announced that Second Chances would be establishing the Hero Memorial Fund to provide emergency assistance for young people and their pets, ensuring that financial hardship would never force someone to choose between housing and keeping a beloved animal. In the weeks following Hero's death, Sarah threw herself into her work with renewed purpose. She was now in her final year of the veterinary technician program and had been accepted to a 4-year university where she would study to become a veterinarian. The scholarships and grants she had received would cover most of her expenses, and Dr. Rodriguez had promised her a position at the clinic during school breaks. Second Chances had become a recognized model program that was being replicated in 15 cities across the country. Sarah traveled regularly to help other communities establish their own versions of the program, always carrying a photo of Hero and sharing his story as the foundation for their approach. The national task force she had joined was developing federal policy recommendations to improve support services for youth aging out of foster care. Marcus had become a certified veterinary technician and was managing the day-to-day operations of Second Chances, while Sarah focused on her studies and national advocacy work. He had also gotten engaged to Jessica, a social worker he had met through the program, and they were planning a wedding for the following summer. Sarah would serve as his best person, a role that honored the sibling-like bond they had developed. Maria had retired from nursing, but remained actively involved with Second Chances as a volunteer coordinator. She had also fostered 3 different dogs since Hero's death, all of them rescues who needed special medical care or rehabilitation. Maria said that Hero had taught her the joy of giving animals a second chance, just as she had given Sarah one. The apartment building where Sarah and Marcus lived had become an unofficial headquarters for Second Chances activities. The landlord, inspired by their work, had designated several units as transitional housing for program participants and charged below-market rent. The building had become a true community, where former foster youth supported each other through the challenges of independent living. On the first anniversary of Hero's death, Sarah organized a celebration of life event that focused on continuing his legacy of service. The event raised money for the Hero Memorial Fund and recruited new volunteers for Second Chances. Sarah announced that they had helped over 100 young people find stable housing and complete their education in the 5 years since the program began. During the celebration, a young woman named Ashley approached Sarah with tears in her eyes. Ashley had been living on the streets for 3 months when a Second Chances outreach team found her sleeping behind a restaurant. The program had helped her find housing, complete her GED, and enroll in nursing school. Ashley said that learning about Hero's story had given her hope that her own life could change dramatically, just as Sarah's had. Stories like Ashley's reminded Sarah why Hero's rescue had been so important. It wasn't just about saving one person's life. It was about creating a ripple effect of compassion and service that would continue long after Hero was gone. Every person helped by Second Chances had the potential to help others in turn, multiplying the impact of Hero's original act of bravery. As Sarah prepared to graduate from her veterinary technician program, she received an unexpected letter from a publisher who had heard about Hero's story at one of her conference presentations. The publisher wanted Sarah to write a book about her experiences, focusing on how Hero's rescue had led to the creation of Second Chances and its impact on hundreds of young people. Sarah was initially hesitant about writing a book, feeling that she was still too young and inexperienced to be considered an expert on anything. But Maria and Marcus encouraged her to see the book as another way to honor Hero's memory and potentially help even more young people who were facing similar challenges. The book would be titled, Hero's Legacy: How a Rescue Dog Inspired a Movement of Hope. Sarah planned to donate all proceeds to Second Chances and similar programs across the country. She wanted the book to serve as both a tribute to Hero and a practical guide for communities interested in developing peer support programs for vulnerable youth. As Sarah worked on the book proposal, she often visited Hero's grave in the small pet cemetery behind Dr. Rodriguez's clinic. She would sit by the simple headstone that read, Hero, Friend, Rescuer, Inspiration, and tell him about the latest developments with Second Chances and her plans for the future. During one of these visits, Sarah reflected on how her life had turned out so differently than she had ever imagined possible. She had gone from being a homeless teenager with no prospects to becoming a veterinary professional, published author, and national advocate for foster youth. But more importantly, she had learned to build meaningful relationships and create a life filled with purpose and service. Sarah knew that Hero would be proud of what they had accomplished together. His single act of compassion on that freezing night had created a legacy that would continue helping young people for generations to come. Every time a Second Chances participant graduated from college, found stable employment, or helped another person in need, Hero's spirit lived on. As the sun set over the pet cemetery, Sarah made a promise to Hero's memory. She would continue, working to ensure that no young person would have to face the challenges of aging out of foster care alone. She would keep telling Hero's story and building communities of support where everyone could experience the same unconditional love and second chances that Hero had given her. The starving dog who had rescued her from a freezing trash bin had become so much more than a pet or even a best friend. Hero had become the foundation for a life dedicated to service, the inspiration for a movement of hope, and proof that sometimes the most profound changes begin with a single act of courage and compassion.